What if I were to tell you that the way in which governments govern, as we've known it, as we've ever known it in the history of the human race, will never be the same? We are living in a time where there's a fundamental shift between the forces of economic and political power like we've never seen. Why? Because businesses have been able to leverage the interconnectivity of information technology, and they have been able to build massive global infrastructure with unprecedented power while government remained in its wake. What do I mean by that? We have entered uncharted territory and an era in which government, relative to its economic power, is at its historic nadir. And while the need to embrace emerging technology is at its apex. And I would urge policymakers, they might want to go down to their digital services groups and give those folks a hug. So, what do I mean by all this? What is government's new responsibility? What is the new formula in this changing global economy? And I'm going to be very careful with the math here, given the proximity to MIT. Is government meant to be innovators? Are they meant to foster forward-thinking policy? Should they be embracing emerging technology? Well, the answer is yes, they should and they must. And why is that? Government today has an opportunity. If this formula is right, government today and the policies that they implement are going to affect every single person. How? It will impact the way that jobs are created, how innovation is stimulated, and it might even change the way that government policy itself is financed. So how can government do this? Well, simply, they have the tools. They need to leverage the most powerful economic development tool they have, which are known as tax credits and incentives, along with emerging technology to create opportunities for its citizens. So, is government prepared to embrace new technology? We all know of examples of businesses that were disrupted or completely dislodged by emerging technology because they weren't prepared. And I want to talk about one of them that's a little personal to me, and that is the New York Stock Exchange. Why the New York Stock Exchange? I grew up on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. There's me. And we were unprepared for new technology, and specifically in this case for electronic trading. I mean, our systems were so antiquated, we ended every day in piles of paper. I mean, look at this poor guy. And I remember when new technology was introduced to the seat holders of the exchange, and I was a young man, so I was brought into a pilot program where I was on with the best technology in its day. And I was given a flip phone, an earpiece, and a Palm Pilot, so I can better communicate with my team and my customers to have a competitive advantage. But it was too late. A 220-year-old institution was acquired by a startup. And here's the New York Stock Exchange today. Now, don't get me wrong, a very important institution, but perhaps better known as one of the great television studios for business news reporting. And now, we grew up. Are we prepared for technology? I mean, it's my view that, we're born with a social security number and an Apple ID. So we are prepared for technology in this day and age. So is government prepared to leverage the best-in-class technology in order to provide opportunities for its citizens? So we know the balance has shifted, and the balance has shifted because businesses today can manage their operations 24/7 from any point on the globe, while governments remain local and geographic in nature. And this further is upsetting the shift between the balance of economic and political power. So, if we were to look back in history, government's economic influence, it was all powerful. The king was the economy. The pope was the economy. And this dynamic began to shift about 500 years ago. And that shift accelerated in the 1940s, primarily due to technology developed by government to fight wars. But once unleashed into the commercial economy, government's economic influence began to wane. So today, some would argue that entrepreneurs and startups have the greatest impact on economic policy. And that was not always the case. So I'll give a few examples of this shift in power between political and economics. The government wanted to break up Standard Oil. They were prepared to use force to seize assets. Rockefeller had a gold company. Roosevelt had a big old army. Guess who won? I think it was Al Capone who allegedly said, a pear and a pistol will beat a full house anytime. But that dynamic changed drastically with the government's attempt to break up Microsoft's operating systems from its applications, because in this case, Microsoft's assets were primarily people, and they can move their operations at any point in time if they didn't get the settlement they wanted from government. And most recently, and as a result of a very tragic incident, the settlement with British Petroleum and the government was very benign. And again, why? Because the company was prepared to bankrupt BP America and centralized all of its operations overseas. So today, the speed and accuracy of information technology, or the ability for blockchain to deliver an immutable ledger system of assets that transact between companies and countries, it's super simple for companies of any size today to compete on a global level. So there is a change and a shift in the behavior between government and business. So if this formula is true, and government has the power today, how is it going to get the behavior it wants from business? How is it going to encourage good corporate citizenship? Today, government needs to use carrots rather than sticks. They can no longer force themselves on business. And the pace at which government can adapt to this may determine where the next big innovation is, or where the next Silicon Valley is, and it might not be in the United States. So today, what I argue is that government can leverage the most powerful economic development tool that it has to surgically stimulate investment in companies and in industries that are innovative and important to its jurisdiction and create the best jobs. And that is through the use of tax credits and incentives. And this is not a fluke. This is a trend that is going to continue. And it is not only in the United States, as jurisdictions compete for innovation and for the best jobs within its jurisdictions. And these policies work, and they don't just affect business. They affect families. They affect children. They affect every one of us, and you may not know it. These policies create innovation in industries and how we consume on our daily lives. And they are super important. But I'll also ask, does government have the technology today? Does business have the technology today to properly manage this very important asset and to maximize its value and the benefit of its citizens? And I would argue no. I would think they are still on horse and buggy with respect to this particular asset class. But fear not, there is technology available today that can help all stakeholders who touch on credits and incentives and help them really gain control of the asset and maximize its value, which is extraordinarily important, particularly when new regulation is around the corner that is meant and designed to help government analyze the true economic benefit of these policies, not only its financial impact, but the ancillary values. So we understand that government's power and influences change, which I've been talking about. But government still has enormous power. Historically, they've had two forms of true global political power. One, military power, and the second is the ability to print money. Now, what happens is if the government's ability to control the money supply is diluted, and blockchain and cryptocurrencies is a direct assault on that last bastion of true global power, well, all bets are off. And once again, the way that governments govern and the relationship to how businesses compete will forever change. And blockchain and cryptocurrencies are transformational forces that will change the way that business is done on every level. And so what if you took that a step further? What if you took these very important assets known as credits and incentives and you made them blockchain enabled, and that is inevitable and that will happen. What if, once you can properly manage how these assets are being distributed and utilized for the purposes of fostering innovation, what happens if government can utilize this asset, blockchain enabled credits and incentives, as an alternative to the municipal bond market to finance its own fiscal policies, whether it be to build hospitals or schools or to fund economic development programs themselves? What do I mean by that? Well, certain jurisdictions, many, find municipal bond financing prohibitive. It's time consuming, it's costly. It might require a constitutional amendment or a referendum. They might not have the credit rating. They might not want the credit risk. So imagine a day and age, and I can see this in the future, where government can really make that formula true by utilizing this innovation of technology and this very important innovation through fiscal policy. Now, couple that with new and emerging technologies where government can really measure the value and the movement of value. And I don't just mean monetary value, I mean the value of quality of life or job creation, all the things that credits and incentives are meant to do. Once government can properly analyze that, well, then they can improve and nurture this relationship between government and business and really remain relevant. So imagine using machine learning or AI or big data, predictive analytics. The possibilities are endless. So why is this important today? Well, one of the most innovative incentive programs to potentially be legislated over in decades came out of the most recent 2017 Tax Reform Act, and those are called opportunity zones. What's really interesting about opportunity zones is two things. One, government, as it is local and geographic in nature, federal government realizing this, empowered the 50 governors to identify economically distressed areas and created programs that can directly impact public-private investments in these communities. And the opportunities, no pun intended, are endless. Endless. And if I'm a new business, I would locate in an opportunity zone. And once you marry technology to the analysis of that, once you can map where the opportunity is, measure the benefit, and identify the outcome, best-in-class policies will emerge. And we will continue to fine-tune this relationship between government and business. So today, both government and business need to think differently about credits and incentives and about technology. In the past, businesses may have looked at credits and incentives as a tactical, a nice to have, whereas today it must be strategic in nature. It is going to be the difference that enable companies to compete and win on the margins. And in the same way, it affords government the ability for it to compete and win on the margins. So, why does that matter today? We are in an era of massive disruption. We are in an opportunity where things are changing rapidly due to emerging technology, due to policy changes, due to this relationship between government and business. And it's a very exciting time because when you can marry together all of this technology with the opportunity, we're living in some very exciting times. Technology needs to be leveraged in its proper way in order to unleash business innovation, entrepreneurial activity, and human creativity. In that way, all of this will come together and really change the lives of its citizens. And companies should also look within their ranks, and CEOs and CFOs might want to look at the most important department in their organization. And it may be their tax guys or their IT guys. And so you may want to give those folks a hug. Thank you very much.